Alright, well, here we are in Divide and Conquer version 5.0, one of my favorite mods for one of my favorite games. I really wanted to do a Medieval 2 review, but I've just played the game to death at this point, so I honestly can't play vanilla Medieval 2 anymore. Also, I'm doing a little bit more of a freeform video right now because it's easier to churn those out, and I hope that, the audio quality will be sufficient. I do hope that there's not going to be too much clicking going on, and yeah. Well, with that being said, let's just jump right in it. I haven't actually decided which faction I want to go for. I might give you a quick overview, I suppose, on Divide and Conquer 5.0 and what it is. It's a Lord of the Rings mod for Medieval 2. It's been around in one form or another for more than a decade now. Divide and Conquer itself stems from Third Age Total War Reforged. Third Age Total War Reforged bases itself on Third Age Total War, which was one of the first Lord of the Rings mods for Medieval 2 back in the day. Back then, the focus was more on like the Fellowship campaign at the start. It was like a series of scripted battles that saw you accompany Frodo to Mordor and, to destroy the ring, the usual stuff. But at this point, Divide and Conquer version 5 is more about the classic Total War gameplay where you pit a bunch of factions against one another and you hope for the best. So there's a bunch of factions. I'm not going to count them right now. They're on the screen. You can count them yourself. I know I should have probably looked that up beforehand, but there's a bunch of factions. It's all the classics from Lord of the Rings and some more added on top. Well, I mean, it's not like they made any up, but they for sure fleshed out, certain ones more than they were in the books or in the Silmarillion or whatever. We have the Vale of Dravinian, for example, which is like an almost entirely fantastical faction in the sense that the detail that's been added to it is, you know, of the mod creators' imagination, I suppose. But that's not to say that it doesn't work out very well. I think it's a great faction because it well, without going into too much detail, it has a lot of interesting mechanics. You can decide to be like an elf heavy faction or a human heavy faction, etc., etc. So there's of course evil factions and good factions, and each of them has like a distinct campaign. What I really like about Divide and Conquer version 5.0, and one of the reasons why I am actually reviewing this instead of the normal Medieval 2, is that the balancing is very well done. So I believe the balancing is done with the wealth of experience in mind that people who play Medieval 2 for the last 15 years or something have accumulated at this point. So playing vanilla Medieval 2 is just a walk in the park. It's very boring. You end up spamming mailed knights and winning every battle if you manage to like micro your cavalry properly. And even if you're a newcomer to the game or the series, that is something that you will become accustomed to very, very quickly, which makes the game somewhat boring, unless you like curb stomping your opponents, of course. So the thing is that in Divide and Conquer version 5.0, every care has been taken to balance the game properly in the sense that, there is very few cavalry units. They're very expensive. It's quite hard to get them. And that is because cavalry is king in Medieval 2. It's always been. No matter how hard mods try to nerf them, their simple nature and how they work makes them absolutely overpowered. Well, Medieval 2, as the name says, was a medieval game set in a medieval period. So obviously that makes sense. It's just, if you've seen it 50 times already, how, you can stomp a campaign with England or whatever, and it's like zero challenge against the AI, it does get boring. Which is why I'm not going to show this off today. I'm just going to show off some Divide and Conquer. And for that end, I will probably just jump into any faction and show off the map, show off what's happening. And so for that end, we're gonna be going with let's go with Breland because they're kind of fun. By the way, from what I could gather, difficulty settings are very hard, very hard. Recommended. That's what the game is balanced around. So you should go with that. On the bottom left hand side, you have the classic overview of your faction of choice, as it is the case in regular Medieval 2, only that, it's a little bit more fleshed out here. So it tells you exactly what your faction is going to be about. In the case of Breland, it's going to be ranged focused faction with a strong economy, generally weak units because you are human and hobbits, and military mercantile choice. So this refers to the script that you have at, not at the end, but like I guess a couple turns in, maybe 50 turns. I can't really remember. Anyways, and you have notable units, which would be your unique units. Okay, there's a faction leader, a whole bunch of information on what to do in the early game, military overview, special features. I'm not going to spoil it for you. I just want to show off the mod a little bit, so let's go ahead. And also do note that hopefully my game doesn't crash right now. No, it's working. Great. Do note that I have turned off the music because if you want to do anything with Divide and Conquer or Third Age Total War on YouTube or on Twitch, you should better turn off the music, or alternatively, there is an option to replace the sound pack with non-copyrighted music. But they still make you credit the guys that wrote it, which is fair enough. But I don't want to go through the hassle to have to put in some stuff in my video description. And also, I actually probably prefer the copyrighted music whenever I'm not, streaming or making a video about this. So that's why I've opted to not go that route and instead not have any music on. Also, quite frankly, I tend to not use music in games too much. I don't know why. Some say it's psychopathic, but yeah, I don't know. Like when I'm playing, like for example, any RPG or even what was it, Stalker? I think it was Stalker that made me like really do away with the music because the music just sometimes like cues you in. Oh, it's a bit loud. We gotta give me a sec. I'm gonna adjust this. I am gonna adjust this for a little bit. So the thing with music in games is just that, what's happening, what's gonna be happening in the next 3 seconds because the game knows and it shifts the music to whatever is gonna happen, be it combat or be it like, scary stuff, whatever it is. Like the music is gonna ruin the suspense in a way for me. And to go on a little bit of a tangent here, when I first noticed like the real impact of music was when I watched No Country for Old Men by the Coen brothers, which obviously like only uses, well, it does use music, but only, when it's like in the scene coming from a radio or whatever, but it doesn't like use music to set the tone. And I think that's what made the game so unsettling. The movie so unsettling. So that worked out very well. And ever since I watched that, I realized, I don't want to be cued in by music all the time. I want to actually play the game and, I mean, not have to worry about like being spoiled by what's going to happen next. Because, the combat music. So I think Oblivion is a good example of that, by the way. Like the combat music is already playing and there's like nothing on the screen, right? So, okay, there's like a Minotaur coming through the woodworks in like 5 seconds from now. And I would rather like be surprised by that Minotaur, instead of whatever. That's just regarding music. So if you're not hearing me use music in this video, it's mainly because of the copyright, because I do like the Lord of the Rings music and I think it fits very, very well with the theme of this mod, obviously, and it sets a great mood. But other than that, I do think that, music in games, a little bit overrated. Sorry, guys. Alrighty, so we're gonna go do what everybody does when they first log into a new mod, probably. I don't know. They will toggle the fog of war and it's gonna show them a huge map spanning from northwest to southeast, which probably is true for every map because, directions work anyways. I'll just go through the factions a little bit, right? So here we have the High Elves, which used to be the Elves of Linden, if I remember correctly. So they used to be a faction separate from Imladris, where, Elrond hangs out, where Frodo and the gang roll in the first movie. And now they're, lumped together, which I think is a good design choice all in all. Because, yeah, I mean, the factions weren't too different from one another. And, there are limited slots as to how many factions can be in the game with Medieval 2. Which is obviously a shame, but, nothing you can do about that. North of the High Elves, we have the Dwarves of Eridluin, who also have a script that turns them either evil or towards good. At some point during the campaign, they have the option to take the rings that Sauron offers them, in which case they will go evil. From my experience, it tends to happen quite a lot, honestly. Like, They say in the documentation, it says it's like a 50-50 coin flip, but whenever I play a good faction, I see these guys go evil. So then obviously here we have Bree. They have 1, 2, 3, 4 settlements apparently. Fair enough. Yeah, that's a Dunedain town. Okay. And yeah, you know, you have like all your boys like, ooh, still pretty loud speech. I'm sorry. Sorry guys, I'm kind of winging this, but you know, at least we're getting something done. Bilbo Baggins, the classic guy, and I really, really like, you know, the amount of detail that's going into this mod as a whole. Obviously, it's been in the works for a long, long, long time, but these people really know how to use that time. So you have whatever you would expect, the classic map of Middle Earth that you already know from the intro to Lord of the Rings, probably, that Bilbo has. He has his mithril coat that he got during The Hobbit. I can't remember where exactly. I think Thorin gave it to him after they cleared out the dragon's horde. I'm not sure anymore. And obviously Sting, which they found in the Troll Cave. Every general or character that's like of note has a biography on them that explains, you know, who they are, what they did, blah 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 blah, which is mostly consistent with, you know, what Tolkien wrote about it. So that's pretty nice. And each and every region in the game has a book like this. It's called, you know, has the name of the region and also which culture is preferred there. So if you want to go on a lore deep dive, or if you're just bored in between rounds, it's definitely an option. You know, I can absolutely recommend it. So all right, let's get back to the factions. So we have Bree, they're like, you know, human faction, the usual. We have the Dunedain, which is basically like Aragorn's faction. Aragorn is in that faction. They do have a cool mechanic where they can either reform the Northern Kingdom of Arnor, or they can even reform well, I don't know what the kingdom is called, but you can like merge Arnor and Goner and take over Goner in their campaign, which, you know, only happens if you're the human player, but it's quite interesting and quite something to go for. North of them is Angmar, the Witch King, obviously a evil faction, very, very, very evil. And east of that, we have a somewhat like you know, fan fiction faction, I suppose, in the Snow Orcs at Mount Gundabad. They are actually a neutral faction from what I remember. Let me just verify that. Here we have the diplomacy. Angmar is actually allied to the Orcs of Gundabad. My bad. I guess they're not a neutral faction. They're only a neutral faction if you play as them, I think. Or maybe they changed it. I don't know. I haven't really looked at version 5.0 that much, but I've played 4.5 and 4.6 a whole bunch. Uh, yeah, I also have to mention that there are a bunch of unique battle maps. For example, Burzakul would be one of those unique battle maps. And it basically looks exactly as it does on the world map, so it's a quite interesting approach. You have an outer wall and then like an inner moat and the main keep. So it makes for an interesting fight. The same goes obviously for Minas Tirith. It's quite interesting as well. Alright, anyways, let's get back to the factions. So we have the Snow Orcs of Gundabad that are quite a melee focused faction, I would say. Strong orcs, not as trashy as the other orc factions. They are a little bit more like Isengard in that regard, you know, quality over quantity, but still plenty of quantity to go around. The Valesmen are like the Vale of Anduin. That's a faction, as you can see, Baron's Hall. They are inspired by Baron and the bear guys. You know, I'm so sorry. I should have taken some notes, but you know, I like to wing it. And east of them, we have the Woodland Realm Town, the Thranduil's Halls. This is the Wood Elf faction, which have, I believe, the best archers in the game. Would make a lot of sense, anyways. Although, you know, the other elven archers are nothing to scoff at either. East of them, we have the Kingdom of Dale, another archer faction, this time a human archer faction. Not too familiar with them. All I know is that they have quite a difficult early game indeed in terms of economy if you play as them. Bear in mind, most of the restrictions in terms of economy, etc., don't really apply to the AI as they do to the player, which, you know, is just how these games work, because AI back then and still probably isn't in terms of gaming that great that it could offer a real challenge if it were on even footing with a human player. North of them, you have the dwarves of Erebor, Gimli, Gloin, the usual gang. And yeah, south of that is the Vale of Dorvinion. I've already mentioned it's a little bit more of a fan fiction faction. They do exist, they are mentioned, but most of the details that were, employed to flesh them out as a faction are probably a little bit made up. Not that I mind, I'm just, using this as a disclaimer. There is some stuff in here that you won't find in the books like that. So, southeast of them, we have the Easterlings of Rune. They have a cool mechanic where if they conquer the cities and settlements around them that are rebel settlements, they will unite the tribes and, get access to new generals that spawn near Mistrand, as well as being able to recruit specific units to those tribes. South of them is Kant, which is like they are the horse archer faction, I suppose. As I mentioned earlier, they have done away with a lot of cavalry, but Kant being somewhat special still gets quite a bit of cavalry. And I'm not saying that, there's no cavalry. Like almost every faction has a unit of cavalry in one way, shape, or form, but you can't really spam them as you could in Medieval 2 Classic. Yeah, actually, I played some Medieval 2 Classic yesterday because I originally wanted to make the video about Medieval 2 Classic, and it's just obscene. Like I played on hard, so I mean I'm not like the best Total War player by any means, but I think it's quite a formidable difficulty, anyways. And you could just steamroll pretty much anything with like a cavalry spam, and once you really know that, it gets a bit boring. I mean, of course you could not use the cavalry or whatever, but hey, if it's there, then you're gonna use it, right? So I think the Divide and Conquer mod team did a splendid job by limiting the availability, because Medieval 2 in itself is a great game. The gameplay in terms of battles is far, 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 far superior to anything that Creative Assembly have churned out in the last probably almost 10 years. I would say their last decent entry, especially in terms of battles, was Attila. And after that, I can't really remember anything that I enjoyed too much, but I think they only released Warhammer, right? They released Warhammer, Three Kingdoms, which is like Warhammer, and they released Troy and whatever this Pharaoh debacle is now. But this is not a video about the shortcomings of CA or whatever. I'm just saying Medieval 2 is a great game, so you should definitely try it. If you haven't, you probably have. If you have tried it already and haven't played it in a while, you should get back to it. There is so many mods out there that you're gonna have a great time with. And yeah, anyways, I'm just gonna get on. You have Mortar, the usual. Mortar is pretty fun to play as, I would say. I mean, I do enjoy the evil factions a lot. And Goner is maybe one of the greater challenges of the game, even though you do start with a lot of territory, as you can see here. This is, by the way, before the turn 2 auto expansion, which I will get into in a second. You have a lot of territory, but you also have a lot of enemies. You have Mordor to deal with, you have Herat to deal with down here, and you have the Ar Adonai to deal with. The Ar Adonai are the Black Numenorians, as they are referred to. They are, what used to be the Corsairs of Umbar, the guys that Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas and the Army of the Dead ambush, on the fields of Pelargir in the third movie, where they go on the ship and massacre everyone. That were the Corsairs of Umbar, and they have been changed to be the Black Numenorians in this. So they do use Corsairs in their armies, but as a matter of fact, they are a little bit like the, counterpart to Aragorn and the other, like, Numenorian descendants. They're like the evil Numenorian descendants from the south. And there is some lore about those guys somewhere. I think I remember reading some by Tolkien, but not a whole lot either. So this is also mainly a fan fiction faction. What's really cool about those guys, if you play as them, then you basically get a ship, you get a full stack, and you don't start with Umbar. You can just go wherever you want. So there's a couple of cool starts that these guys can have. There's a lot of replayability to be had, which is pretty awesome. So okay, we had Khan, we had Herat, kinda skimmed over them. I mean, Herat, I can't say much to Herat. I've never played as them. Dolamroth is quite nice. If you want to play pseudo Gondor campaign, Gondor, pseudo Gondor campaign without, the struggle of playing as Gondor, because, I mean, at least for me, having a lot of settlements can be a little bit overwhelming. If you don't want that, then you can play as Dolan Roth, and you will just have to contend with the Ar Adnaim, Harad, and eventually Khand in case they don't go for the Blue Wizard choice, which is a script that allows them to turn good. If, they win a couple battles. Like, they have to win a couple pretty tough battles in order to do that, but, it's doable. And either way, you will have a couple tough battles, whether you decide to stay evil or turn good. It's gonna be a fun campaign as Khand. Rohan. Rohan is a pretty fun faction as well. It's gonna your campaign is mostly gonna be dictated by fighting Isengard, and once you've dealt with them and maybe dealt with the Dunlendings, it's pretty much done for. The clans of Enedwaith have a similar mechanic as Rune, where they capture, their outlying settlements, and then they can reform their culture a little bit and start upgrading their towns more and more, because there are a bunch of restrictions in terms of what you can actually build and can't build as Wildmen factions, for example. So Wildmen would be Enedwaith, would be Dunland, would be the Vale of Anduin over here, and maybe I think that's it actually. I don't know. Oh yeah, and there's also Dol Guldur that I kind of skimmed over, which is the shadow of Mirkwood, the necromancer that's been said to have returned to Dol Guldur, who was actually Sauron and got banished by, I think, Galadriel and the council, whose name I forgot. Anyways, and there's also Lorien. Yeah, there's Lorien. Oh, and there's the goblins, who no one ever plays, but they are quite fun, I suppose. I mean, they're quite interesting, let's put it like that. Like, you have the trashiest units imaginable, and you will lose army after army, but the thing is, you can replenish a lot faster as your main adversary, the elves or the dwarves. In terms of Khazad-dûm, if you were to play as the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, then you would not spawn out with Khazad-dûm already captured. Instead, you would spawn over here at Erebor, and you would have to journey all the way there to take Khazad-dûm. I suppose you could also take any other settlement if you wanted to, but why would you? You're the dwarves of Khazad-dûm. Okay, so with that out of the way, take a good look at the map in the bottom left corner, if you so please. And I will now end the turn, and something magical is going to happen. But before I do that, I will actually make sure that we're not following the eye movement. We're not good. So let's end the turn, and let's see what happens. Oh no. Oh, that's not good. Oof. I had to quickly mute the sound. I hope we're still good. I might have to cut out that part of the video, actually. They got me. They got me. I turned up all the music, but the end turn apparently still has some, which is a shame. So if you do want to play this game on YouTube or Twitch, disregard what I said earlier, because the end turn is gonna get you. Oh man. Okay, anyways, so I hope you were paying attention to the bottom left. Unlike me, I was busy sweating my ass off over the copyrighted music. So what happens is basically, you, the player, did not get anything. You still have the same 4 provinces that you had at the start, but everybody else expanded massively. As you can see, Numinas, which was currently previously controlled by the rebels, is now being held by the Dúnedain. Enedwaith, which only had Alkfood, has a lot more now. Same for every other faction. Why do they do that, you might ask? Well, the thing is that if you were to start as a player controlling a faction that has, for example, oh, apologies. If you were to start with, any of these factions that already has so and so many regions, the campaign would pretty much become way too easy. So in order to balance that, counteract that a little bit, they are scripting it so that the AI will receive a bunch more regions as soon as the player ends the first turn. So that means that, it stays a bit more balanced, and it's a little bit easier for the AI, because, the AI is lacking. This is a game from 2006 maybe, I suppose. Yeah, probably 2006. And so it needs a little bit of help, to stay challenging for the player, especially if you put in consideration that most people that do play this game have played it for a very, very long time. So on that note, I will say that well, the game is like, I would say the first 40 turns are really, really interesting, and after that, you've either won the campaign, so to speak, or it's over. Like in the sense you've either won it or you've lost it, and it's unrecoverable. Because at some point you will just be in a position that you will find yourself in most Total War games, if you have a little bit of experience, where you can just overwhelm the enemy with resources and manpower, and it's just a slogfest maybe, but you're still kind of steamrolling through them slowly but surely. So yeah, well, that's that. I think well, I talked more about Divide and Conquer version 5 today, but I might actually use this video as a segue into a little bit of a playthrough campaign. I don't really consider myself the best Divide and Conquer player by any means. I did play a lot of Total War, Medieval Total War, Stainless Steel, stuff like that. But yeah, there's just some intricacies to Divide and Conquer that make it quite interesting. One more thing that I will say though is I really, really dislike how they spawn stacks on you randomly. As almost every faction, you will have an event that spawns like a super, super strong stack basically on your capital. Well, maybe not always on your capital, but you're gonna have to contend with them. And it just feels super gamey. I understand why they're doing it. Again, they're doing it to keep it challenging for all players and to make it interesting, but let's just give you an example real quick. For example, if you're playing as the Goblins of Moria and you have Khazad-dûm held, at turn 26 of your campaign will spawn a stack, which is going to be the Dwarf's Expedition to Khazad-dûm, which you could also undertake as a player, by the way. That is pretty, pretty strong, and they're going to siege out Khazad-dûm pretty much immediately. And, the thing is that even though you know about it, or maybe you get a warning about it a little bit early on, you can't really do much about it because you can only have one stack in this city, right? You can only have a garrison that's so big. And the thing is, the quality of goblin units being the quality of goblin units means that you can't really go toe to toe with the dwarves. So if you have 20 units and they have 20 units, they will most likely smash your 20 units unless you know exactly what the enemy army is going to be comprised of, and you itemize, so to speak, against that accordingly, which makes it gamey in my opinion. um I wish there was a way for the challenge to occur a little bit more naturally. I guess the same could be said for the Blue Wizard script down in Kand. Back in the day, I really used to like to play the Elves of Linen because they had my favorite color, purple. Now they're blue, fair enough. But you would get Corsair invasions. So what would happen is you would be expanding out eastwards, probably like somewhere over here already. All this stuff would be yours, and your most valuable city, your capital that would make the most money and train the best units, would just fall to a Corsair invasion. And you don't really know when it's coming, you don't really know where it's coming from, it's just happening, and then you have to deal with it, which makes it, well, I guess if you like that, then great. This is the mod for you. That's the only gripe that I really have with it, I mean, but I also understand why they're doing it. So again, I'm not faulting them. It's just a choice that they had to make, and they made it, and that is fair enough. Anyways, I've been going on about this for half an hour now, which is quite interesting considering I'm not using a script, I suppose, which I shouldn't even have mentioned because it's probably glaringly apparent. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope the audio was satisfactory. I'll do my best in post to adjust it further, and if you do want to see a little playthrough of this, I would be very glad to oblige. If not, then I will return to my regularly scheduled programming from here on out. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.